Every satisfying era has its quiet architect, someone who didn't just win, but changed what winning meant. Geoff Duke was that man for motorcycle racing. He passed away in 2015 at the age of 92, leaving behind 6 world championships and a standard that still echoes through every corner of modern MotoGP. He was the first to treat racing not as recklessness, but as a discipline, a craft, built on preparation, precision and restraint. In his final years, Duke rarely spoke about trophies, he spoke about people. Now, to be clear, Duke never published a list, he never sat down and named 5 riders in a single breath. But across decades of interviews, memoirs and reflections, certain names kept surfacing, always with a weight that went beyond admiration. This is a reconstruction, not a transcript. A reading of a man through the riders he chose to remember, and if those fragments are placed side by side, the picture begins something like this.
When I look back at my career, I don't count titles, I count the people who forced me to rethink how I raced. Racing to me was never about courage. It was about understanding the machine, the road, and most importantly, the limit you must never cross. There are 5 names that stayed with me longer than any finish line, not because they were the most famous, because they were the most right. I remember the moment I first understood what racing could be. It wasn't on a track. It was hearing about a man who raced before the world had any idea how to make it safe. Back then, racing was closer to a battlefield than a sport. No barriers, no runoff, no reliability. Most riders survived on bravery alone, and most of them didn't survive long. The man who changed that picture for me was Stanley Woods, an Irishman who competed from the late 1920s through the 30s, winning the Isle of Man TT 10 times in an era when finishing alive was already an achievement. His name may have faded from modern conversations, but in my mind it never did. What set Woods apart wasn't speed, it was smoothness. In a generation that rode on instinct and adrenaline, he rode on calculation. He managed his pace instead of pushing every corner. He read the race instead of fighting it. And because of that, he finished again and again while others didn't. I came back to his name many times over the years because he was the first rider who proved to me that thinking mattered more than risking everything. What I learnt from him wasn't about survival. It was about avoidance, the understanding that the best riders don't escape danger. They never enter it in the first place. That concept, winning without overcommitting, became the foundation of everything I built in my own career. Woods didn't survive because he was lucky. He survived because he never put himself in a position where luck was required. That was the kind of rider I wanted to become. A good rider is fast. A great rider understands why the machine allows him to be fast. That distinction may sound subtle, but it separated everyone I ever raced against into 2 categories. Those who rode on feeling and those who rode on knowledge. John Surtees belonged to the second group more completely than anyone I had ever seen. 7 world championships on 2 wheels. Then he crossed over to 4 wheels and won the Formula 1 title in 1964. To this day, he remains the only man in history to have become world champion on both a motorcycle and in a car. That alone would be enough to earn respect. But what I admired most wasn't the record, it was how he achieved it. Surtees didn't just sit on a motorcycle. He studied it, he was known for working directly with engineers, reading technical data, discussing setup in mechanical language rather than gut feeling. When he moved from MV Agusta to Ferrari, he didn't struggle. He adapted almost immediately because he understood principles, not just one machine. Most riders of my generation felt the bike, and Surtees thought about it. He approached every race the way an engineer approaches a problem, not with instinct but with structure. And that made him something rare a rider whose technical mind was equal to his riding skill. I always believed that was where racing needed to go. Riders should not just be athletes on a seat, they should be engineers on a saddle. Speed without understanding is incomplete. Surtees was the man who proved that to me. Natural talent was never the first thing I looked for in a rider, because talent without control usually ends in a crash. I had seen it too many times. Young men with extraordinary ability, gifted beyond anything training could produce, who burned bright and then burned out. Speed came easy to them, discipline did not. And in racing, that imbalance is fatal. Mike Hailwood was different. 9 world championships. They called him Mike the Bike because he rode as if the machine was simply an extension of his body. His talent was the kind that anyone could see from the first lap, fluid, instinctive, almost unfair. But that was not what earned my respect. What I admired about Hailwood was the line between effortless and reckless. He made racing look easy, but he was never careless. There is an enormous difference between those two things, and most people miss it. Hailwood never did. The clearest proof came in 1978. After 11 years away from racing, he returned to the Isle of Man, TT, the most dangerous circuit in the world, and won. Not by taking risks that a younger man might survive, by being precise, by riding with the same calculated control he had always possessed, still intact after more than a decade of silence. That comeback was not a story about courage. It was evidence that true discipline does not fade. It stays in the hands, in the instincts, in the way a rider sees a corner before entering it. Talent makes people notice, but control is what made me respect a man, and Hailwood had both. One victory shows talent, but only when you repeat it year after year, season after season, do you know it is greatness. I have always believed that. A single race can be won by luck, by weather, by someone else's mistake, but a career built on dominance across an entire decade that requires something far beyond talent. That requires a system. Giacomo Agostini had that system. 15 world championships, 122 Grand Prix victories, numbers that even now remain almost untouchable in terms of winning ratio sustained over time. From 1966 to 1975, Agostini stood at the top, not for a moment, not for a season, but for nearly 10 consecutive years. What I respected about him was not the speed at any single point. It was the ability to maintain that level across different machines, different regulations, different generations of competitors. The sport changed around him. He did not drop. That is the dimension none of the others quite reached in the same way. Woods taught me intelligence. Surtees showed me the engineering mind. Hailwood proved that talent could be controlled. But Agostini added something. None of them fully represented time. He proved that greatness is not a moment, it is a trajectory. I always considered him the benchmark for what a complete rider looks like over a full career. Not the fastest in one afternoon, the most consistent across 1,000 afternoons. Anyone can be fast for one race. Agostini was fast for a decade. That is the standard. I don't belong to this era. But I recognised it immediately when I saw a man who understood racing the way I once did. That is not something I say lightly. Generations change, machines evolve. The sport I helped shape in the 1950s bears little resemblance to what it became in the 2000s. And yet, watching Valentino Rossi, I saw something familiar not in his style, but in his thinking. 9 world championships. A career that stretched from 1996 to 2021, 25 years, at the highest level of motorcycle racing. Those numbers alone, place him among the greatest. But what separated Rossi from every other modern rider was not how often he won, it was how he won. Rossi was a master of managing his opponents inside a race. He knew when to apply psychological pressure, when to wait, when to strike. This was not instinct. This was strategy, calculated, deliberate, and often invisible to anyone who wasn't looking closely. But the most remarkable thing about him was adaptation. He raced across entirely different generations of technology, from 500cc 2-strokes to MotoGP 4-strokes, from Bridgestone tyres to Michelin, and remained competitive into his 40s. If Agostini represented consistency within a stable system, Rossi represented consistency within a system that never stopped changing. That is the evolution I always hoped racing would produce. A rider who understood the sport beyond just speed, beyond just machinery. A rider who managed the race mentally before physically. In Rossi, I saw the future of what my generation had started. When I place these 5 names side by side, a pattern appears, and it is not the one most people would expect. I did not choose the fastest. I did not choose the bravest. I chose the ones who understood. Each of them carried a different dimension of that understanding. Wood showed that intelligence could replace recklessness. Surtees proved that a rider's mind should match his machine. Hailwood demonstrated that natural talent only matters when it is held under control. Agostini revealed that true greatness is measured not in a single race, but across time. And Rossi showed that the principles we built decades ago could evolve and still hold true in a world we never imagined. Put together, these are not just 5 riders, they are a system of values. I never chased speed for its own sake. I chased understanding. The machine, the track, the competitor, the moment all of it had to be read, not attacked. That is what separated the riders I admired from the ones I simply remembered. People will remember me for the races I won, 6 world championships, the Isle of Man, the Leathers, the Norton. But if I could choose what stays behind after all of that fades, it would not be a trophy. It would be this, the belief that greatness never comes from recklessness. It comes from understanding. And if these 5 names say anything at all, they say exactly that.